I can take this pretty much finished, albeit headless, regretty spaghetti and fit it into my ape's outstretched arm, then wrap it around the body in a loving serpentine embrace. After a bit of finagling, I've got a pretty good pose, which means it's time to rip my ape's fingers off so that I can begin the enzombification process for the snake. Admittedly, the ape's fingers didn't really play a necessary part in any of that, but I wanted to remove them now so that I had a better access to the snake since I could just finish sculpting the fingers later. As far as the zombifying of the snake is concerned, it's pretty much the exact same process as zombifying the ape, but this time the ribs are much smaller and much more abundant. With the body baked, I can then get to work on the head, attaching an oblong heart-shaped shape to the top of the snake before carving a big gouge out of the underside and attaching a bottom jaw. Then it's just a case of poking and prodding and faking it till I'm making it into a somewhat snake-looking shape, at which point I can carve out a large section of the left side of the head so I can make an exposed skull beneath, since apparently all zombies need their skulls exposed. I'll then gussy up the inside of the mouth so it looks a little more like the inside of a mouth, as well as carve away a bit more flesh from the top of the head and use another homemade roller to add a bit of scaly texture to the top. Finally, a little eyeball goes into the eyeball hole, and I can add a pair of big fangs to the top jaw and some smaller fangs to the bottom jaw, as well as a long loopy rotten tongue into the middle of the mouth. And with the snake finished and fit in place, I can finally finalize the fingers on both hands, giving the left skeletal hand some bony phalanges and the right hand a less bony, more normal looking set of fingers. With that though, this undead duo of duelers is all but done and ready for a couple coats of paint. I want to give my monkey a gnarly washed out rotten flesh tone, so I'll start with a very watery purple base coat followed by a rotten green on top before blending the two colors together to get me a gnarly blue that I'll blast with a heavy misting of isopropyl alcohol while it's still wet, which will make the paint separate and dry in a splotchy gnarly pattern. Then this gets followed by a final putrid yellow, and it's on to painting the snake, starting with a solid ivory over the entire surface. I always liked the look of corn snakes, so I decided to give this particular guy a similar shading with some lighter orange scales, followed by some darker orangey red highlights to fill in the spaces. I wasn't really thinking too far ahead, as there's going to be a lot of exposed bloody red meat beneath, but for now I'll knock the vibrancy down a tiny bit by washing the whole body in a dirty brown to make it look a little less alive. Then it's back to that initial ivory to base coat all the broken bones and exposed fleshy bits so that I can come back with a dark red wash over the top to create the initial dark dried blood red stains beneath. Once that's had a chance to dry, I'll work my way around the blood red bits with some lighter reds to bring back a bit of detail into the muscle and exposed meat before attacking everything again with a washed out bruise-like purple followed by a lighter pink on top. With the red bits finished, I can bring the ivory back one final time to base coat all the bits of bone so that I can give it all a sepia wash that I'll dab away the majority of using a teeny tiny sponge, leaving my bony bits with a nice weathered look. I'll then give all the meaty muscly bits a coat of gloss varnish so they look extra gnarly, and it's time to paint the eyes, which I give an initial cataracty white to gray gradient before mixing in a little blue for the ape and a little green for the snake. Finally, I need to give my ape a bit of hair as he's looking a little naked, so I'll paint his body in sections with some thin PVA glue so that I can apply a layer of dark, dead 4mm static grass. It'll go on pretty splotchy with this method, but given that this ape is not exactly looking his best, I think this splotchy blotchy application is pretty much perfect. Finally, this fearsome duo is completely done, and all that's needed is a little podium to stand them on. Originally, I wanted to make a resin river for them to stand in, but I still haven't actually restocked my resin, so a quick pivot will have to do. And in lieu of a resin river, let's go with a muddy, hole filler PVA and brown paint swamp. I'll add this tasty looking top coat to a little foam disc I cut off camera, then sprinkle a bit of chopped up tree detritus on top before drenching the mud with a healthy helping of swamp water. A quick mix together will make my mud look swampy, and I can fit my ape's feet into the swamp water before it cures so he's properly set. Last but not least, all that's left to do is give each of these gaping maws a bit of goopy stringy glue since they're screaming at each other, and that's us all done here and on to the glamour shots. As always, a big old thank you to the fine folk over on Patreon, and a special hey how are you to the newest of them, Jacob Cooper, Lady Slytherin, Katie Last, Greg Marsh, Erica Beale, B. Morley 253, Susanna Boo, Aaron France, Cal Henderson, Tenebra Voss, Monkey Dreams of Riding Goats with Oily Josh, River Wanderer, Giltus, Bite a Breezeal, Comey Killswitch, Jenny Beans, Rebecca, Paul Didda, Nicole Nadler, and High Malice. You are the little strands of tendon and muscle that keep this zombie of a channel from coming apart at the seams. As of this recording, it's April 10th, and I think we all know what that means. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.